The Bible prophesies that the center of world power will swing to Europe in the times that are just ahead. Could that really happen? If so, how? The prophecy is found in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 2. Listen carefully. Now, I'm talking about the prophecy that foretells that the center for world power will not be America in the end time. It's going to swing to Europe, not to China, but it's going to swing to Europe. The Bible explicitly says it. Listen to the prophecy. Revelation 13, 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Okay, let's pause there for a moment. If you've been listening to this program for a long time, you probably already know what these symbols mean. However, the symbol of Great Britain is the lion. The mouth of this end-time world government beast is Great Britain. Then the feet of the bear, the symbol of the Russian bear. Russia's official animal symbol is the bear. So Russia is going to be an integral part of the one world government of the end time. Then the body of this beast was the body of the leopard. The leopard is Germany. Then it talks about 10 horns. There's a 10-nation alliance out of which the Antichrist will actually come to power, and this 10-nation alliance will come out of Europe. So this beast describes a Europe-centered power. Russia claims to be a part of Europe. Great Britain. Of course, Germany is the heart of Europe. And then all these 10 nations that will come into this end-time alliance, they're all part of Europe. So the Bible prophesies that this end-time one-world governmental system will be dominated by this European power. And it also prophesies that the leader of this European power will be a personage called the Beast or the Antichrist. So this is what the prophecy has to say. Now, if we look at world affairs right now, it's a little bit difficult to imagine how we could transition from where we are today with the dominance of the United States of America and the rising power of China. Why would the Bible prophesy that there's going to be this very strong and significant shift of world power from the U.S. and from China over to Europe? Europe is going to be the power base of the one world government of the end time, which will be led by the one world leader of the end time, the personage the Bible calls the Beast or the Antichrist. Let's read a little bit more from the prophecy. Verse 5, and there was given unto him a mouth, speaking of the Antichrist, a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Throughout the Bible, we're taught that there's a period of time coming called the Great Tribulation, and that it will last 42 months. That's what this is talking about. The reign of the Antichrist in all of his power will be short but very powerful. 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. So he's going to be opposite biblical Christianity. He's going to blaspheme. He's going to make fun of. And then verse 7 says, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. This is the true people of God. And to overcome them. During the Great Tribulation, many true saints will be overcome. Many will be killed. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. The Antichrist is going to dominate the world. And then it says this in verse 8, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Notice the exception there. The only people who will not worship him and give allegiance to him will be those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand what it takes to get your name in the Lamb's book of life. Jesus Christ came to this earth and he authored a plan of salvation called being born again. In order for you and me to have our name written in the Lamb's book of life, we must be born again. Endtime Ministries has a free brochure. You can go to our website, endtime.com, and there you can read this brochure. What do you mean born again? So important, because the whole world is going to be caught up in this euphoria. They're going to follow this one world personage, except for those who understand the Bible and those who are born again. You and I, we certainly want to be a part of that select group.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-END-TIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
Now remember, we began our program today with the statement that the center of world power in the very end times, we're talking about during the final 7 years, the center for world power is going to swing to Europe. Now we've read to you the prophecy of how we know that that is true. That depicts the one world government of the Antichrist. And remember that verse 5 of chapter 13 says, power will be given unto him to continue 42 months. That is speaking of the last 3.5 years of a final 7-year period prophesied at other places in Scripture. So that's what the Bible tells us. From this passage, we know the end time beast is European. And that's what we understand. That's what we need to know. Now, the world has been pushing for world government since World War II. It all began after the war with the founding of the United Nations in 1945. The idea was to create a system of global government that could prohibit war from ever happening again. We had just experienced 52 million fatalities in the horrible war. It was unprecedented in all the annals of history. And yet it happened. 52 million died in that horrible Nazi-precipitated war called World War II. Now, after World War II and after the founding of the United Nations, it was an era of hopefulness. However, it didn't turn out that way for a while, because immediately the Soviet Union moved to capture, in the peace following World War II, what Adolf Hitler had failed to capture during the war. They ended up capturing all of Eastern Europe, placing Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain and under the death grip of communism. Well, the other half of Europe remained under the control of the West, the Allies. This situation went on, and it resulted in what was known as the Cold War. So you had the Soviet Union controlling Eastern Europe, you had the Allies controlling Western Europe. This situation went on for 40 years. It was a time of a lot of tension. It was called the Cold War. It never resulted in a full-blown war, but there was continual maneuvering and tensions and trouble spots around the world between communism and the democratic West. So that happened for 40 years. And yet the dream of the United Nations and a successful world government that could control the nations and promote peace, the dream continued to live on even below the simmering embers of the Cold War. Finally, a man by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union, and by 1989, there was a lot of the controversy that seemed to be abated and solved. You probably remember the words of Ronald Reagan toward Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, if you love freedom and peace like you claim you do, tear down this wall. And that was the challenge from Reagan to Gorbachev. It wasn't long, a year or two later, until the wall came down. It was November the 9th of 1989. When the wall came down, the world was filled with euphoria. The Cold War is over. It's going to be peace on earth. Within 20 days, President Bush Sr., Mikhail Gorbachev, Pope John Paul II met together, and they came out of their meeting 20 days after the wall fell, announcing the birth of the New World Order. We begin to hear about globalization. We all were told, now you must think globally, because what they were saying was, we're going to dissolve the nation states and we're going to go into a system of global governance. So we will be one world and we will have peace on earth. Well, this all hit somewhat of a hitch in 1990 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. 1991, President Herbert Walker Bush put together an international coalition to go against Saddam Hussein. President Bush announced very emphatically, this conflict, this Gulf War, is not the United States against Iraq. This is the world against Saddam Hussein. So he painted a picture. He actually put together a coalition of 29 different nations that contributed either supplies or troops to this invasion force that went against Saddam Hussein. They had hoped it would be the last war of the Cold War and the advent of a true new world order. Well, the dream lived on. They kept pursuing it, of course. Saddam Hussein was defeated. Then came Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was very much for one world government. There was a man that was a friend of President Clinton's. His name was Strobe Talbot. And he wrote an article for Time magazine in which he said, in the 21st century, nationalism as we have known it will cease to exist. we will all answer to a single global authority. Well, he wrote that article in 1992. However, shortly thereafter, President Clinton invited him to come to the White House and to serve as Deputy Secretary of State. Of course, the Secretary of State, that's where our foreign policy is administered. That's where all the ideas for running the world come from. So now we have this man who said national sovereignty as we have known it will cease to exist in the 21st century. We will all answer to a single global authority. Well, understanding Bible prophecy and knowing that the Bible prophesies this one world ruler to come, that statement set off alarm bells in my head. Now, it was Endtime magazine. I did not know who in the world Strobe Talbot was at the time, but I bought the magazine. I read it carefully, and I thought, oh my goodness, he is proposing exactly what the Bible prophesies for the times that are just ahead. Well, it really sent shockwaves through me when less than 1 year later, President Clinton brings him to the White House to help run our foreign policies. Well, believe me, he did run our foreign policies, because in 1997, President Clinton spoke at the opening of the United Nations. And there he proposed something that the one-worlders had long desired. They wanted a world court that every human being on the planet could be brought before to be placed on trial for certain crimes. Now, if you can be brought before a world court, you will not have the protection of the human rights, of the Bill of Rights, of the U.S. Constitution, none of that. All that would be stripped away. You are now under a higher system of the law, the world court. Well, President Clinton, in his speech before the UN in 1997, said the time has come to establish our long dreamed of world court. Undoubtedly, he and Strobe Talbot had discussed this in detail. Well, immediately, the international forces and those favoring world government swung into power and swung into action. In the spring of 1998, they had a charter writing conference for this new world court. They decided to call it the International Criminal Court. I think that was in April that they had the charter writing conference. And then in June, from June the 15th until July the 17th, over 30 days, the nations of the world met together and they finished off the charter for this international criminal court that would have power over all the nations and all the people within the nations. Well, originally, President Clinton had planned on all cases going to the International Criminal Court being referred to it by the UN Security Council. Now, the reason he wanted that was because the U.S. has veto power over everything approved by the UN Security Council. So consequently, if there was ever anyone recommended to be placed on trial before the International Criminal Court that was from the United States of America, we would have the power to veto that resolution, and it would never happen. However, once the powers that be got together and they were meeting together to pound out the Constitution for the International Criminal Court, they decided that they were going to create an independent head of the International Criminal Court who could try anybody on the face of the earth, and they did not have to be referred to the International Criminal Court by the UN Security Council. That ripped the control out from under the United States of America. Consequently, President Clinton acted like he was not going to join the court until the very last day. Finally, on the last day, he said, well, we're going to join because we would be better able to change the court if we're a part of it than if we are on the outside looking in. So President Clinton did join the International Criminal Court, placing all American citizens under its power. His successor, George W. Bush, he reversed that action. He revoked our signature from the International Criminal Court. When we signed on originally, Israel followed in our footsteps. When we withdrew our signature, Israel also withdrew its signature. Israel had a lot to fear from the United Nations because the UN has been both basically are prominently anti-Israeli. So they really feared this International Criminal Court, lest their generals, their soldiers, even their prime minister be summoned before the court and be placed behind bars. Consequently, that's what all was going on during these times of negotiation. Well, when President Obama was elected, he was very much a multilateral person. He believed the world should be run multilaterally. He did not believe that world affairs should be conducted or dominated by any nation. He believed in true global democracy. And all that would be run through the United Nations. So if there were a conflict between nations, they would be required to go before the International Criminal Court. Both of them present their cases. Then the International Criminal, not the International Criminal Court, before the UN Security Council. Then the UN Security Council would make a determination as to what was right, what was wrong, and all the nations would be required to obey it. Now, another very important factor to this whole thing to make it work was global disarmament. One of the biggest segments, biggest departments at the UN is the Department of Disarmament, because the United Nations does not want any guns loose upon the earth except under an international army, a UN army. When you go walk on to the yard of the United Nations in New York, the first thing that will meet your eyes is on a big cement stand, a big revolver. It's about 6 feet long, and it's got a knot tied in the barrel, signifying that they believe the key to peace on earth is the total disarmament of the whole world. That's the reason the international community hates our Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, so bitterly. They hate it. And there are many forces here in the United States of America, they believe in world government and they believe in total disarmament. So the vision was, we will disarm the whole world, only the world government will possess armaments, and therefore they will be able to enforce their will upon the whole world, and we'll have peace on earth. One problem: what's going to happen if an Adolf Hitler manages to get control over the only army that's left? Now you're going to have the worst tyranny the world has ever known. People say, oh, but that will never happen. Well, it will happen. The Bible specifically prophesies it's going to happen, but it won't be Adolf Hitler. It will be someone much worse. The Bible calls him the beast, or the Antichrist. We already read about him, and the scripture says the dragon gives this beast his seat, his power, and great authority. If you'll look a few verses before Revelation 13:2, if you'll go back about 5 or 6 verses to Revelation 12, verse 9, it says, I saw the dragon, that old serpent, the devil, and Satan. The dragon is Satan. So Satan is behind this move toward world government that's going to enslave the whole world under this personage called the Antichrist, and he will require the whole world to pledge allegiance or to worship him. And you actually will be worshiping Satan through him. Satan has always wanted the worship that belongs to God alone. He will have 3.5 years before this tried to overthrow God, and consequently, he failed. He will fail, but he then will come to the earth and he will work through the Antichrist during that final 3.5 years to try to get all the people in the world to worship him, because his number one ambition is to take God's prized creation, the human race, turn them away from God, turn them unto himself, unto Satan, and cause the whole world to worship him. That's Satan's big plan, and the prophecy I read to you today says that's what's actually going to happen. Well, as President Obama continued to pursue the policies of multilateralism, March of 2011, there were problems with Muammar Gaddafi, and Obama wanted to eliminate Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. However, as all this was boiling in the news, Obama never bothered to go to our Congress to ask permission to issue airstrikes against Muammar Gaddafi. What did he do instead? He went to the UN Security Council. They passed a resolution approving this action. One day, the very next day, we were activating the military power of NATO against Muammar Gaddafi. Never ask the Congress of the United States of America, because by that time, President Obama felt like that he was moving from the control of the United States of America, and now we were recognizing this single authority, the United Nations of the world. And so consequently, he never did get approval from the U.S. Congress for that action. He just took it arbitrarily, because now that he thought that the UN was the ultimate authority on earth, not the United States of America. Well, in addition to that, President Obama at this time was promoting migration. There's a huge policy of migration in the UN, because they really feel like all the peoples of the world should be able to live anywhere they want to. They believe in a world without borders. They believe that people from Africa should be able to move to America. They believe that they should be able to come from Mexico, from El Salvador, from everywhere on earth. They believe in a total elimination of the nations. They believe in a one world government, a one world population, a world without borders. Well, President Obama was a big believer in this. Of course, he himself had lived overseas and been schooled over there. So he was an internationalist down in the depths of his heart. And so he pursued these policies for the United States of America. Well, along came the elections for 2016. Hillary Clinton appeared to be the heir apparent to the throne of Barack Obama. And she promised, I will carry on, only much faster, the policies of internationalism that President Obama has pursued. And she planned to do it. However, there was a big chink in the armor. A man by the name of Donald Trump came along in 2016, launched his campaign. And in our next segment, I'm going to tell you how all this took a sudden turn and what this actually means for us today. Stay with us.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
In our last segment, we were talking about the Center for World Power swinging from the United States, from China, to Europe. The Bible prophesies that's what's going to happen. So what kind of events will pave the way for this to happen? We spoke in our last segment about a man by the name of Strobe Talbot, who said in the 21st century, national sovereignty as we have known it will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority. When I read that from Time magazine, published in 1992. It alarmed me because I knew the prophecies of the Bible said that was exactly what was going to happen. There was going to be a world government established, and there would be a single authority, just like Talbot said. That single authority would be a man called the Antichrist. I have Talbot's book with me. It's entitled The Great Experiment. Now, Strobe Talbot went on to serve in the State Department with President Clinton. He happened to be Clinton's roommate when they were both Rhodes Scholars in Oxford. So they knew each other very, very well, and they believed the same. Well, Talbot continued to push one world government through the administration of President Bill Clinton. I have his book here. I'd like to read a couple of excerpts from it just so you can get an idea of how much Talbot plainly promoted one world government. He said national sovereignty, as we have known it, will cease to exist in the 21st century. You and I are in the 21st century right now. And the forces that agreed with Strobe Talbot are very much in power around the world today. Let me read a couple of things. This comes from page 4 of the introduction. In all these cases, the UN is exercising, on behalf of all nations, responsibilities and powers that used to be largely, if not exclusively, in the domain of sovereign national governments. So Talbot is admitting that the UN has now taken over many of the responsibilities and the duties of the national governments. He goes on to say, when the nations of the world take joint action, they are in both senses of the verb practicing global governance. They are doing something necessary and difficult, and with experience, they are learning to do it better. The article goes on to say, actually the book, in the nation that is host of the UN's headquarters, the very term global governance tends to be used with nervous caution, as though with tweezers, especially in my hometown, Washington, D.C. I noticed early in my time at the State Department that Foreign Service officers used euphemisms, of which multilateralism was one. They had learned, sometimes to the jeopardy of their careers, that public mention of global governance can be publicly radioactive. Either it has the ring of woolly mindedness, or far worse, it is taken as code for a belief in a world government that turns nations into provinces of a global superstate. To those inclined to see it that way, and there are many, the UN is a stalking horse for a conspiracy to deprive the United States of its independence and its citizens of their freedoms. Well, that's exactly what Talbot himself said it would do. In the 21st century, national sovereignty will cease to exist, and we will all answer to a single global authority. It looked like this philosophy had so taken a hold of the United States of America that there was no turning back. Many of us as Christians, knowing what the prophecy said, were praying diligently. When the election for 2016 came up, we didn't see any hope on the horizon. It looked like the same powers controlled both parties. However, when I watched the 17 Republicans line up across the podium in that first debate, right in the center was a man by the name of Donald Trump. I didn't know anything about Donald Trump. I knew he was over a thing called The Apprentice. I wasn't interested. I'd never watched The Apprentice. And so I didn't really know who Trump was or what he believed. But he quickly caught my attention because when he made his statement, he came out very strongly against globalism. Well, I knew what globalism was. Globalism is the belief in global government. The belief that the nation state is no longer an effective way to rule the world, since we're in the days of the internet, of instant communication around the world. We have jet airplanes, we can travel all over the world, and consequently, Trump said there's many people who believe in globalism, but he said, I am adamantly against globalism. And then he also spoke out against the establishment. I knew what the establishment was. I knew that there were powers that had gained control of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, so that we were basically voting for Tweedledee or Tweedledum. When no matter which party was elected, the same basic policies continued. Well, I found out later that the establishment, that there's a club in America called the Council on Foreign Relations that had provided 50% of all cabinet members in the last 50 years, whether the Republicans were in power or the Democrats were in power. No wonder the same policies continued on. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about the establishment. It was way back in 1921, actually between 1913 and 1921, that three powers were established. It was the Federal Reserve Act and the Federal Reserve Board. It was the Brookings Institute, and it was the Council on Foreign Relations. The main goal of the Council on Foreign Relations was to prepare and to educate young people, getting them ready to serve as leaders of our government. And they would indoctrinate them in the systems of global governance. Now, this was born in 1921. Believe it or not, these three organizations were all formed by one man. And this one man did not become an American citizen until 1911, and he ended up being on the Federal Reserve Board in 1913. He had only been a citizen 2 years. He was from Europe. Well, he also served as a trustee of the Council on Foreign Relations. And as I mentioned earlier, over the last 50 years, over 50% of cabinet members come from the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, whether the Republicans or the Democrats have been in power. Well, as you know now, President Trump was unexpectedly elected in 2016. He immediately began to pull the U.S. out of the different instruments of global governance. He pulled us out of the Paris Climate Change Accord, which was the horse the globalists were planning on riding to international law and international government. He pulled us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was an international trade organization that was supposed to put all the economies of the world together. The Economist magazine said about President Trump, Trump is the world's greatest enemy to the global order. Well, let's talk a little bit now, because I'm asserting that the Bible prophesies the center for world power is in the last times, especially the final 3.5 years, is going to swing from the United States, which is where it resides basically now, to the European Union, that 28-nation union that now has their own constitution. They signed it at the Treaty of Lisbon on November the 3rd of 2009, and they now basically are a United States of Europe. Now, the Bible says that Europe is going to be the center for world power during these final 3.5 years. But could it be? I mean, is Europe powerful enough to do that? Let's look at the EU's gross domestic product. They have a yearly production of 18.8 trillion. The domestic product for the U.S. yearly is 19.39 trillion. Real close. Furthermore, though, the European Union has a debt of 13.5 trillion, but the U.S. debt is 22.7 trillion. So they have almost the same income as we do, but yet they have much less debt, about $9 trillion less debt. So could the European Union be strong enough to actually replace the United States of America as the strongest power on earth? Not only could they are going to, according to your Bible and according to mine. Now, the following article comes from the European Council on Foreign Relations. It's entitled, "Can Europe Save the World Order?" Now, they believe that Donald Trump is wrecking the world order because he's pulled out of the Paris Climate Change Accord. He's pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The European Council on Foreign Relations, there are many nations that have a chapter of the Council on Foreign Relations. There's the Japan Council on Foreign Relations. There's the Russian Council on Foreign Relations. There's the American Council on Foreign Relations. This international think tank has basically infiltrated all the nations of the world. Now, here's what the article says. The liberal rules-based order is under threat from both established opponents and former supporters. Europe has a vital interest in the preservation of a rules-based system, but it needs to rethink the elements of that order for a new global environment. The European Union can best support a rules-based order by ensuring its continuity at home in Europe, supporting liberal values abroad through the use of European economic power and alliances with like-minded states, and adjusting its strategy to protect the order's core elements in an era in which illiberal states have growing power. The EU should put the defense of a redesigned rules-based order at the center of its global strategy and back it up by strengthening Europe's financial independence and security capacity. The EU should also prioritize efforts to compensate for the global diplomacy deficit that U.S. President Donald Trump's policies have created. Okay, let's stop right there. Do you see where they're going? They're saying that the United States was very much a partner with us working towards global governance, toward this new world order, until this non-politician by the name of Donald Trump comes along and is unexpectedly elected. And now then The Economist magazine says he's the world's biggest threat to the New World Order. The Economist magazine is Europe's #1 magazine. It's called the Periodical of Kings and Presidents. By the way, it's owned by Lord Rothschild out of London. So we see all these forces come together, and this whole article is devoted to Europe moving in the gap when it looks like Donald Trump is wrecking the New World Order. Now they're asking the question, can Europe save the world order? That's what this whole article is all about. Now I'm going to take you a little further as soon as we get back. We have many things that show you the prophecies prophesy of one world government. One of the things we have is our course, World Government Forming Now. That's one of our passages, one of our DVDs. I recommend that one highly. World Government Forming Now. Call us, 800 Endtime. I'll be back.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-END-TIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
So could Europe save the New World Order? They thought they had it in the bag until this man by the name of Donald Trump comes along saying, we do not want to sacrifice America's independence. We don't want to trade our Declaration of Independence for a Declaration of Interdependence. We do not believe in multilateralism or global government. Remember, Strobe Talbot said, we have to use euphemisms so that the people will not know what we're really saying. We say multilateralism, but we really mean global governance. Well, Strobe Talbot said in the 21st century, national sovereignty as we have known it will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority. However, President Trump comes along and said, oh, no, we won't. We are not going to sacrifice America's independence on the altar of global governance. Let's continue on with the article from the Council on Foreign Relations out of the European Union. The world is becoming a scarier place. Trade wars loom, great power competition is returning, proxy conflict is spreading, and President Donald Trump has withdrawn the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Agreement on climate change. Rules and alliances that once promoted international cooperation and stability seem to be losing their hold. In their place, there is a resurgence of international relations based on assertive nationalism. Now, nationalism to them is a dirty word. Recently, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said that nationalism is treason. Wow, strong words. Nationalism is treason? Why does he say that? Because nationalism is the enemy to global governance or to one world government. And he believes that one world government is the only answer to peace on earth, as do most of the peoples of Europe and many people here in the United States of America. So he goes on to say, based on assertive nationalism, winner takes all competition and disdain for the rule of law. Hopes that international politics would encourage the spread of democracy and human rights have faltered, while authoritarianism and illiberalism are in the ascendant. These changes have led many people to argue that the liberal international order developed after the Second World War is breaking down. The rules-based order is under threat both from inside and outside. For most of the period since 1945, it was a joint project of the U.S. and its European allies. But now, Europe must respond to a radical shift in which the U.S. under Trump has become a significant threat to the system, to the world government that we were building. Trump's policies and disregard for European views and interests have created a crisis that compounds longer-term strains on the international order. In response, the European Union urgently needs to design and implement a strategy for preserving the core elements of a rules-based order. Now remember, I read beginning of the program, I read the scriptures, Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 and 2, that depicts a one world government and a leader of that one world government that will end up devouring the entire earth. These people dream of a one world government, of global governance, and they think that will solve our war problem. It won't. It's going to end up in the worst war we've ever known. It's a battle called the Battle of Armageddon. The article goes on to say, this policy brief attempts to work out a vision of international order that could guide the EU, the European Union, and to suggest how the EU could put this vision into practice. The EU is heavily invested in the idea of a rules-based international order. The Union exemplifies the belief that states are most able to prosper through cooperation, openness, and a rule of law that incorporates a commitment to democracy and human rights. The EU's international standing is linked to the credibility of the principles it embodies. More practically, European countries want an international order that protects them from external threats and allows them to promote their economic interest through worldwide trade and investment. European public policy is committed to the principle that multilateralism, now what did Strobe Talbot say? Multilateralism was a euphemism for global governance or world government. I said to an official from the UN one day, we were touring there, and he said, the United Nations is not in a world government, or is not world government. We are about global governance. I raised my hand and I said, could you explain to us the difference between global governance and world government? He paused, he stepped back 3 steps, swallowed real hard. He said, well, that may not be easy. Well, I knew it wasn't going to be easy because I knew global meant world, and I knew governance meant government. I looked it up in the dictionary. Governance has a one-word definition, government. I knew it was the exact same thing, but he was trying to use these euphemisms to fool us into thinking the United Nations is not planning on being a one-world government. It is world government from the top floor, the 34th floor, all the way down to the bottom. So, the EU is committed to the principle that multilateralism is the best way to create global public goods. So now you can see from this article from the Council on Foreign Relations out of the European Union, you can see what they really think. They already can see the handwriting on the wall. They see that President Trump has pulled us out of the Paris Climate Change Accord. Now you may say, wait a minute, I believe in climate change. Well, what do you mean by climate change? Do you mean the weather's going to be different tomorrow than it is today? Or do you believe that the weather is going to change so dramatically that the whole world is going to be destroyed if we don't change the weather? Now, if you think that mankind is going to change the weather, good luck. Because we never have, we never will. Do you know that the Paris Climate Change Agreement was going to cost America trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and within the next 100 years, it would alter the temperature by 0.2%. Trillions, 0.2%. So instead of being 98 degrees, it would be 97.8 degrees. I mean, no literal difference. You say, well, why are they pushing climate change like they are then? Because climate change gives them an excuse for enacting international law. Since the air does not stop at the border and the water does not stop at the border, those are the two principal things we have to control through this theory of climate change, then we have to have international laws. And the plan is to give every single one of us a carbon footprint so that you and I are all limited to a certain amount of carbon emissions per year. If we exceed that amount, we're going to have to purchase those from another country who is not industrialized, that doesn't use all theirs. And the cost will not be cheap. So what's going to happen is, once you reach your certain quota, let's say you get there by August, that means you're going to have to pay several $1,000s for additional carbon credits in order for your heat to continue working, your water, everything else. You say, well, why in the world would they want to do that? Have you heard yet about wealth redistribution? Have you heard of social justice? They believe in the dream of Karl Marx. They're all socialists. Most of the world is socialist. Now here in America, the Democratic Party has become the Socialist Party. Did you ever think you would see a candidate, a serious candidate running for president here that was an open socialist? Well, we don't have one or two. We have many of them. Virtually every candidate running for the presidency right now in the United States of America is a socialist. I never thought I would see the day. But they bought into this system of global governance, and they believe in social justice. The Pope loves to promote it all the time. They believe in wealth redistribution, and nobody ever bothers to answer the question, If socialism is so great, why is Nicaragua broke? Why is Venezuela one of the poorest countries in South America, and they were the richest country before they adopted socialism? Why did it wreck the Soviet Union? Why? We need to ask those questions because socialism is a mirage. It does not work. But the Bible prophesies that the world government of the end time will be socialistic. If you want a picture of the end time world government, go to Revelation 17. And there you will see the same seven-headed, 10-horned beast that we started this program with. It's there again in Revelation 17, only this time it's red. Have you ever heard of red China? Red Russia? Red Romania? Red is the official color of socialism. The Bible prophesies this last day global governance instrument, this last day world government, will be a socialist government. Now, is it happening right now? Do you realize who the Secretary General of the United Nations is today? He's the world's #1 socialist. Antonio Guterres, he was the president of Portugal at the head of the Socialist Party. After that, he became the president of the Socialist International. They have an international organization called Socialist International. Socialists from every country on earth belong to it. He was the head of the Socialist International. Then he became the Secretary General of the United Nations, the organization designed to be a one world government. We have a dyed in the wool. The world's #1 socialist is the head of the world government called the United Nations today. How did he get that job? Well, you do know that the United States of America has veto power when it's time to elect the next Secretary General. But we didn't veto his name, even though we knew he was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. He had come from being president of the Socialist International. We didn't veto his name, but we pushed his adoption. Who did that? That happened in 2015 under the Obama administration. Does that mean Obama wanted a socialist to head the one world governmental system for this system of multilateralism? And that's what President Trump is turning on its ear right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now you know and now you understand. To get a fuller understanding of some of the things I've been saying on the last 2 programs, number 1, I would encourage you to get Understanding the End Time. It's our 14-lesson series that will take you from 0 to 95 miles an hour, prophetically speaking. At the same time, why don't you go ahead and get my brand new Revelation commentary, just out. It is fabulous. Revelation written 2,000 years ago, but written for you and me today. It's available right now. Call us. The number to call, 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.